Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Grow therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/book now today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/book now. growtherapy.com/book now. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan. Are you noticing your car insurance rate creep up even without tickets or claims? You're not alone. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry handles the legwork by comparing quotes side by side from over 50 top insurers so you can confidently hit buy. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Jerry even tracks rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Don't settle for higher rates. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/libsyn today. That's jerry.ai/libsyn.
Mike Carney, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Marcus.
Great to have you on the show. So your career started as an engineer for NASA and then moved into professional sports. So how does an engineer for NASA start working in the sports industry?
Well, it's really interesting because, engineers hopefully typically would have a logical approach to solving problems. And I think engineers at their core really are problem solvers. Today in the sports industry, it's a really special time in the sports industry. And, the industry needs problem solvers. I think engineers bring a rigor and an approach that I think really any industry can use. When I joined the sports industry 10 years ago, it was all very, very new, the strategy or analytical sides of the business. And, so I think it's actually quite a natural fit. And even better when you're doing it in an industry where you understand it. We're all consumers of sports also. So anytime you can combine that approach with the passion, it's generally a recipe for success.
For sure. And we will dive into that deeper for sure. But just before, like NASA, I assume the background checks are pretty thorough. Like, how does one get a job at NASA as an engineer?
I started in high school at Goddard Space Flight Center, then kind of continued that along in college with Kennedy Space Center down in Florida. I just always had a love for space and the frontier at that time. The shuttle program was still very much alive and kicking at that time. And I just always had this kind of childhood dream of being an astronaut. I mean, many kids do, but I really enjoyed my time at Goddard and then ultimately at Kennedy Space Center. And so, and then, but look, I think ultimately, as I kind of went through the consulting ranks and then into sports, ultimately wanted to follow my passions. And it was definitely more in the sports industry.
So now when it's easier to go to space, is that something you would like to do?
It's a really, really fascinating time, especially with just the capabilities that are now in space. If you would think about that internet would be available in all these rural areas today, I mean, that was almost unfathomable when I was working at NASA now over 20 years ago. So it's a really special time, although I'm very, very happy within the sports industry and solving the problems that we're solving here. But as an observer, it's a really special time in the space industry too.
Yeah. So when did you decide that you wanted to pivot into the sports industry?
It was 2014, and at the time, the Nationals had the Washington Nationals, where I came from, they had a visionary chief revenue and marketing officer, Valerie Camillo, and Valerie really was pioneering some of the analytical approaches on the business side. I would say previously, at least weren't very mainstream. There were certainly teams that were doing it. The leading teams were doing it. it was still pretty absent. And it's amazing where we are here in 2026 and the capabilities that teams have added in the analytical space. But this was now 11 years ago, and it was very, very new at that time. And it was a combination of the fact that the sports industry was, at the time, I thought it was still a kind of an opportunity space. There weren't a lot of really deep capabilities, especially related to analytics. And that was really interesting, coupled with joining a great team under Valerie at my hometown baseball team, the Washington Nationals. All of these things really just clicked for me, and the opportunity to grow something new from scratch. And, I think we built something really special at the Nationals.
Yeah, and you were the vice president of ballpark operations. So what does that role entail?
Well, it was vice president of business strategy. It was more on the optimization side, less on the true operations, but more revenue management. So ticketing and sponsorship and kind of managing the business side, P&L. Things that are now quite commonplace. But how do you price your tickets? What season ticket holder benefits you provide? What does the fan experience look like? All of these spanned across. There were certainly departments that were working on that. But I think where the business strategy analytics teams have started to really be successful is as connectors. They're making sure that there's a unified strategic approach that all these different experts within the verticals can help to contribute to, and just make sure it's all unified across the business. Because sports businesses are living, breathing entities. Your ticketing team and your marketing team, your sponsorship team, they all have experts in their given area. And all of these different areas contribute towards the success of the business. And I think this group that could remain independent and ultimately contribute to all the department's success, I think it's added a lot of value.
Definitely. And do you think there are any skills that you learned from NASA and engineering that you can bring with you into sports?
It really comes down to problem solving and the approach. So you take an example of how a fan interacts with your brand, and you think about what are all the various touch points that a fan has with a team. The fan may come to your venue, they may not come to your venue. So if they're not coming to your venue, how are they interacting with your brand? Social media is still a relatively new phenomenon in the grand scheme of things, right? 15 plus years, but how teams have activated their social media channels for storytelling, and especially local storytelling that are so unique to these communities. Being able to look at all of these customer touch points and think through how that rolls into a business strategy, where how are you continually adding value for your fans and truly having a fan first approach. This is to me where NASA or engineering in general, I think, has the most applicability, because it really is like solving a problem. And in fact, you need to continually solve that problem. Fans have much higher expectations now, especially post-pandemic. They have much higher expectations. The fight for consumer dollars is more intense now than it's been in the past. And we need to keep upping the bar, with our teams. That goes for teams owned by on deck partners, but also all the other teams, to ensure that they feel like they're really getting value, for what they're paying for these experiences.
Yeah, and I've spoken before about like the marketing principle. You mentioned that how do you capture the fans at the stadium and not at the stadium on a game day, but it's also not game day at the stadium, not at the stadium. So how do you make sure that you capture the fans in these four different buckets?
I mean, you have to provide an incentive for fans to want to engage with your brand, whether that interaction involves data or not. If you are giving your fans what they're looking for, your fans, oftentimes what I found is they won't have a problem giving you their data if they feel like there's something that they're getting in return. And that's what teams need to continually do, is make sure that we're providing those experiences. Take something as simple as digital ticketing. In the area that we work in at On Deck Partners in minor league baseball, digital ticketing is still pretty rare. I mean, there are a lot of teams that still operate on paper tickets. They operate mostly at the box office. This may seem foreign to a lot of major league teams, because major league teams have had this for many, many years. In fact, the Nationals were on the leading edge of that in 2011. There needs to be that incentive. For why would a fan who's used a paper ticket for the past literally 30, 40, 50 years, why would they all of a sudden go to a digital ticket? Well, maybe we'll offer some kind of discount or promotion if you use a digital ticket. And these are the kind of things where, if you think about it strategically and you add that value to the fan, not only will that fan, engage with you in the various channels you have, but also will go home and talk to their friends about the great experience they had. So whether that touch point is any one of the four areas that you highlighted, wherever that touch point may be, if you're adding value to the fan, you're going to continue to get that fan back in your venue.
What would be a reason why someone did not want to have a digital ticket instead of the physical one? Is it for a collectible reason, or because maybe for older fans that they are not so high on technology, or?
Well, customers been trained for decades. I mean, minor league baseball has been around for 100 years. And if what your parents did and your parents' parents, if they've always come to the box office on the day of the game and gone up to their friend Ed to buy the ticket, that's just kind of what they've always done. And so changing the consumer mindset and changing customer behavior is inherently hard to do. And so certainly, yes, younger generations, they're certainly much more digitally adept. But for, many of the fans in these markets in which we operate, many of them have been coming to these games for decades. And so how do we make sure that the experience that we're giving those fans and the experience we're giving is the same as the experience we're giving to all of our fans? That's a challenge to make sure that you make it for every individual segment that you're working with, that every segment feels like, we're meeting them where they are.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned On Deck, which is your company. So how was that transition? We spoke before about transitioning from NASA into sports, but now to go from Washington Nationals and then start your own venture.
Well, it's a really interesting time in sports, and I would say a really special time in sports where now that institutional capital has been coming into the industry, sports is a great application for this institutional capital because a lot of these businesses haven't had the level of investment that other industries may have had over the last period of time. It's still a relatively new phenomenon that private equity and institutional capital has been in sports. It's so relatively new, at least at scale. And for a business like minor league baseball, it's been around for 100 years. And what value can institutional capital coming in add to these businesses that have been quite successful for 100 years? What was interesting for me was really to just kind of piggyback off our earlier part of the conversation. This was a really unique challenge to solve for. And why? These businesses operate in these communities, that small and mid-sized communities that where the baseball team is inherently central to what they do and how they get entertainment in their city or their town. I love that. I love being able to come in and invest in the ballpark and invest in the fan experience and give these communities an even better experience than they've had in the past, while still not changing what has been great about baseball for centuries, or at least decades and into over a century. And so our model is different than others in the sense that we want to maintain everything that's going well, but let's add on to things that we think could bring added value for the community and ultimately get the community around us in that. So that's really to me what was especially unique about this opportunity with Avenue Capital Group and ultimately what became On Deck Partners is that it's a unique challenge to solve for, but it's still, in an area that I know really well, which is with how baseball operates and how fans operate and working with Major League Baseball. It was a great opportunity to try to solve a new challenge.
Interesting. So yeah, you mentioned adding value there, and I know that that's your USP, so to speak. So why is that so important for you for the creating these long-term community values?
From a values, there's many different ways that value can be created or enhanced in minor league baseball. One area that we're looking at is, how can we improve the venue? What are areas where there may be, certain segments of a fan base that have not been met where they are, whether that's a birthday party, whether that's a corporate outing, whether that's something larger like a concert. How do you make improvements to the ballpark to be able to deliver to these customer segments and also bring new value to these fans overall by bringing new experiences? So both on the kind of capital investment side, as well as on the operational side, how do we continue to add value across both of those? Because that ultimately is what a business is all about. So that's one or two areas that you'll see us investing. You'll also see us investing in potentially in new markets as well. What are some new areas? Mixed use there's a lot of new mixed use developments that are either underway or been completed. We believe that these small and mid-sized towns could benefit from that. That may be as simple as having a building that's surrounding the ballpark. That may be something in collaboration with the municipality where there's park space or other kinds of things, but it's all part of a master plan that's going to bring these communities to the next level. So all of these things together, really yield a true enhancement to these communities where there's value that's being created for the community. And ultimately, it generates more business for the team and makes the team more successful too. So there's a really unique opportunity, especially in minor league baseball, but I would say across the sports ecosystem where institutional capital can really make a difference.
Yeah. If one's goal is simply financial, then you say, I buy this team for X and I'm counting on it to grow to X time X 1.5. and then I
Right.
sell, and then I made a profit.
Right.
I assume it's harder to measure value in that terms, like community value. So when you have invested, how would you consider success and a return on your investment?
I mean, at the end of the day, success is customers coming through our turnstiles. That is success. Success means that we have created an impact for the community. And how you measure impact is fans spend their money with their feet. They come into your ballpark, whether that's for a game, whether that's for a concert, or whether that's for just a simple outing on a Monday night with your company. That's how we will generate value is by doing that. And that's for our investors too. With fans voting with their feet, they are coming to our ballpark, they're turning our turnstiles, and we're generating a return from that. But I think what's different about minor league baseball is that this return has to be authentic. Because of the nature of these, where these teams are, we aren't operating in large markets like New York, LA, or Chicago. Or even Washington, D.C. We're operating right now in Visalia, California, and Montgomery, Alabama. I think the impetus on us is even greater in those towns to prove the value to the fan, just simply because there aren't as many people there as there are in the larger markets. So it's more incumbent upon us to prove that value, and we're up for the challenge.
That's great to hear. So was it always certain that you would choose to invest in minor league baseball and not major league?
So yes, we're a part of Avenue Sports, and Avenue Sports is, invested in other sports properties. The purpose of the On Deck Partners company is just minor league baseball. There are other investments that that Avenue makes, but for us, we're just focused on minor league baseball.
And is that a conscious decision to do that, to go after the smaller markets?
Yeah, well, I would say market size is not as important as what role the team plays within that market. Our niche and where we're really focused are on those markets where the ballpark is really central to the community entertainment. If you have a lot of different options around, it's not to say that we wouldn't pursue that market, but I think there has to be something magical and unique about the cities and towns that we're in, and specifically related to the ballpark district, what surrounds it, and those kinds of qualities. If there's a larger market, perhaps a AAA market, it's not to say those are absolutely in play, but they would still have to meet that kind of basic criteria of being the central point of entertainment.
Interesting. So how do you think the private equity model will look going forward? Do you think that it will go into more of the value-driven approach like you guys do, or do you see something else coming in the future?
I don't have a crystal ball in terms of, how all that will fit together. What I'll say though is that fans are going to be increasingly critical of making sure that they're getting a value for the dollars they're investing in these teams. Private equity needs to deliver on that value. And that's going to be to me, the most important part is really focusing on the fan, listening to your fan. And with the fan comes other corporate partnerships and comes events and all of the other elements as to what makes a ballpark business a business. That to me is what is going to be the most critical part for private equity to be successful. And frankly, whether it's private equity or any individual investor or anything else, it is always critical to do that. Once you stop listening to your fans, you really don't have a sports business anymore.
No, and that's tricky, right? Because the new generations coming have different needs than the older ones, and it's a lot of talk about like attention span and people not going to the game. They cannot sit through a whole game and they only watch highlights. And so, how do you get that generation, but also the ones that wants to go to the box office to buy his ticket from Ed, and like how do you like? That's a tricky puzzle.
It is for sure. I've been to a lot of minor league baseball games this year and last year as part of this role. And, because I believe you really can't understand a business unless you're in front of the fans. So I've just been able to observe many, many ballparks across the country, how fans interact with the experience, what experiences at these ballparks are resonating with what kind of segments of your fan base. And it's been really, really interesting because there are still those fans that want to come and sit in the same seat every game and keep score. I mean, that fan is still a very, very important fan within the business. However, there has been this growth of hospitality spaces, group areas. We are investing in those spaces, but at our venues, we deployed a few new group areas at our Montgomery ballpark for the season. And you find people there that aren't watching a single pitch of the game, that they're there for the birthday party, they're there with their company, they're there, whatever they are. It's been really fascinating to see where these ballparks now really can deliver to both of those experiences, which are quite different. But that challenge will continue to grow, and the segmentations that come from that will also get more fragmented and more complex. And that's why we need to be up to the challenge to continue to deliver on each fan's desired experience.
Yeah. So is baseball your sport? Is that something you have played and watched a lot growing up?
It is, and in fact, fun fact, our COO Jeff Weiland and we both played club baseball at Northwestern. I won't say when, but it was many years ago. And so I think having grown up playing baseball and then having worked at the major league team for many years, and Jeff did as well, you really have to be passionate about this business. We see a lot of minor league baseball games, and I think if you're not passionate about baseball, you may be in the wrong sport because there's a lot of games and it's a lot of time, but we're definitely having fun doing it.
That's great to hear. So it doesn't get too much, so you lose that love you have for the game.
No, no, not at all. And look, I think that there's baseball, Major League Baseball's done a nice job of adjusting the rules. And I think, the games have a faster pace now. They're appealing to new markets and new audiences. Every game has to evolve. And I think baseball has evolved in the right ways to keep the so-called traditionalists engaged, but also appealing to new demographics, new customers, new fans. I think they've done a nice job, and it keeps the game really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned you've been in the industry for a while and done a lot of things. We have mentioned those here. Has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
It's a great question. Sports teams are inherently really small to mid-sized businesses. And I think a lot of times fans may not realize it looking outside in, because they go to a game at Madison Square Garden and they see the New York Rangers, the New York Knicks playing this game in front of 20,000 people. And it's a small team that runs these businesses. And, that's even more acute at the minor league level. But I don't know if I would call it a bump in the road. I think everything comes with opportunity. But we were a very small team at the Nationals, and there were a lot of things that were done by a very small group of people, and it really brings you together. So now that can come with its bumps too, because, there's not always great process involved in how you go about things, and decisions may not always have the same rigor that you might have at a Fortune 50 company. But that's also what makes it cool, because there's an entrepreneurial spirit that many people in the sports industry have. It's a very, very tight knit network. I'm sure many people from your podcast are connected because, we're all in this together. We want to make sports better. We want to make live entertainment better. And that comes with, learning from the experts and learning from not just your fans, but the community around you and the professional sports community. And I've loved every minute of that, to be able to get to know really, really talented people in the industry. They've been very good to me, and hopefully I've returned the favor from time to time. But that to me is what is really unique about the sports industry, is just how well run these businesses are, despite not having the same kind of workforce that larger companies have. It just shows the depth of expertise that these teams have and the passion that they have for the game.
Yeah. And I guess you have to be like more like quick-footed and be able to change a lot. And as you said that you were very structured and as an engineer and problem solving, was that like working in these small teams? Was that something you felt were better or worse in that case?
I'll definitely say it was a challenge. It was an
Yeah.
adjustment coming from whether it was NASA or the consulting career I had following that. I was often working with larger companies where there was a lot more structure. The flat structures of sports teams typically, and some are more structured than others, but what I loved then and continue to love today, is that decision making is much faster at sports teams because it has to be that way. A lot of times something will happen at a venue and you need to react to it. That could be something positive, like the first time XYZ has ever happened. There also could be things like a medical emergency and what that means. You need to be quick footed. And some of the structures that larger companies have really wouldn't be applicable in many ways to a sports franchise, especially at the team side, because you do need to have the ability to make quick decisions. You're not going to bat 1,000 on those decisions. And, you need to be able to know when you made the right call and when you made the wrong call. And fans are typically pretty resilient with this, and every team has their days. Some are better than others. But if you're authentic and you give the right message to your fan, you're always honest about how you go about your business. I found fans can be pretty forgiving how they approach their allegiances, these longstanding allegiances to their teams.
Yeah, I think the transparency there and honesty is a big part. Like because they feel invested in their teams and they do invest in that. They go to the games and they spend times and they want to know what's happening on the inside to an extent. Of course, you can't know everything, but they want to know something.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's it. And especially post pandemic, I think that transparency, that need for transparency actually has accelerated. Yeah. I mean, from the past, teams sometimes weren't as transparent, whether that's a sports side operational decision or a business side. I think it's more and more important to tell your fans what's going on. And once your fans decide and react how they want to react to that. And that's relatively new. And there are a lot of tools out there now, not just social media, but that can help to make sure that you get the right message in the right hands of the fan to enable that transparency, and that creates a better relationship.
I always give the example with the Drive to Survive series. I felt like that lit a fire under fans to get more of the behind the scenes type of content. And then it followed from tennis and so forth. But no, fans want those behind the scenes. They want to know what happens inside their favorite sport teams.
They do. And I think teams historically have shied away from that. That's what fans are looking for, to your point. I would also say that, your best fans, the ones that are engaging with you the most, should get the best experiences, right? And so how do you enable great content to get into the hands of your best fans first? These are, again, areas where I think teams have needed to evolve over the course of the last several years. And now there are tools to do that, but teams have been growing their staff to support content creation and distribution. I think it's really, really important. This is what fans are looking for, and especially your most valuable fans.
100%. So you mentioned some networking things before and what's learned from the industry. There are a lot of young people listening that might be early in their career or they want to get into the sports industry. So do you have some advice for someone who wants to pursue a career in sport?
I do. It's be persistent and be aggressive. We're still a pretty small team at On Deck Partners, but we've had a couple folks, whether those are for internships or full-time positions, that reached out either to me, our COO or our CFO, VPs on the team, saying, hey, I've heard about you guys. I like the mission that you have. How can I get involved? And we've hired some of these people, right? And it's simply because they reached out, they were passionate about it, wanted to have a conversation. I try my best to be able to have conversations like those with people who reach out, because ultimately, if you're proactively asking for an opportunity, A, it means that you already have the baseline appreciation for what we're doing and passion for it. But B, you're not afraid. You're not afraid to reach out and express interest. There are some inherent qualities of that lead, in my opinion, to more successful professionals. There are those people throughout my career that did that. And frankly, many of them have gone to very, very successful sports careers. It is a very hard industry to get into. I'm aware of that. But I will say, though, that the cream always rises to the top. And there are really, really good people in the sports industry that want to help those who are just coming in, whether that's from a master's program or undergrad or from an internship. And there's a meaningful number of people that in the sports industry and executives that want to help and bring those people on board. So I would encourage anyone, keep an eye on what's out there, know what you want to do, and go after it. And I think you'll find that it'll be a recipe for success.
I love that. And as you mentioned, there are people out there who are willing to help, and access has never been easier than today with the LinkedIn and social media and everything. So if you're, as you said, aggressive and consistent or persistent, then I think that will serve them well.
Yeah. And look, there's a line on everything. I think persistence has a line, but if you're genuine and it's what you want to do and you approach it in the right way, there's a lot of people that want to help.
Of course. How can the listeners learn more about you and your company and what you guys do?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. We're at ondeckpartners.com. My email inbox is always open. I'm Mike at ondeckpartners.com. My management team too, Jeff Weiland and Chirag. We're a first name at ondeckpartners.com. So you can reach out to us anytime. Follow us on social media. And I guess perhaps most importantly, come out to a game in Visalia, California or Montgomery, Alabama. They're great experiences. They're great communities. And if you haven't been to a minor league baseball game, and you can't get to Visalia or Montgomery, I encourage you to go to your local minor league ballpark. I think it'll be an experience that you won't forget.
Amazing. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you, Marcus. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow the podcast on Instagram, X, and Facebook @SportsMPodcast.